Career Break Compass has been such a meaningful project because the strategy behind writing it was, how can I help people through their own journey of burnout to also understanding if they wanted to take some sort of break, whether they wanted to take an extended amount of time away from work, how could they do that in a way that did not hurt their career and their career trajectory, but also allow them to still refuel themselves, be able to be passionate about their life and their work again, and really get aligned with what their core values are.
I'm Melanie Barr. Welcome back to the She Built It podcast, your go-to place to empower you to live the life and business that you crave. I'm here to talk about everything from having the courage to make life and career leaps to the details of how to lead effectively, create successful teams, implement strategies for growth, and infuse tech innovation. I'm here to celebrate your wins and navigate through your challenges. I live in the city now, but I grew up in a town of 1,000 people. I've navigated major life leaps, a senior level corporate career, worked in professional sports, and now as a successful entrepreneur who loves business, technology, family, and making meaningful connections with you and the She Built It community. I also love a good workout and dose of self-care. Magic happens when we focus on the part of ourselves and our business that brings us joy. So turn up the audio, open your favorite notes app, grab your favorite drink, and here we go. Welcome back to the She Built It podcast. Thank you for joining us, Laura. What inspired you to transition from leading marketing initiatives at Fortune 500 companies to founding Solle Solutions?
The biggest thing that was a shift for me was I experienced extreme burnout. And I had been working in corporate America for the last 20 years. And I knew there was something else, something deeper within me that wanted to do work that would be impactful. Not that the work I had done on the corporate side wasn't impactful, but something that more closely aligned to my values. And so initially, when I started Solle Solutions, the thought process was, how can I be a powerhouse within an organization to be able to shift their marketing initiatives? But what it really came down to, what I quickly learned, was that the work that I was meant to do was being able to help leaders lead organizations in a way that was creating more sustainable success so that they weren't creating burnout on their teams. And that really became the catalyst for Solle.
And it's so true because sometimes I've seen leaders where they put more and more on their team members instead of making sure the operations are functioning in the right way or the communication is streamlined. So I see how people can get burned out in those situations.
Yeah, for sure. Within an organization, there's so many people that you are appeasing, right? Especially for middle management. You've got your team that report to you that you're trying to essentially shield. You have your upper level leader who you're reporting to that may have specific needs and what's the department goals. Then there's the C-suite of what they need. And typically there's either investors if you're PE owned, or there's the board. Even if you're private, you have people who are funding these organizations that have very deliberate goals. And so as a middle manager, you're being pulled in so many directions. And ultimately, most of these managers have not received the training to be able to be effective leaders, let alone be able to take care of themselves or their teams in this new paradigm that we're working in that requires leaders to not just deliver results, but create culture.
That's so true. And a lot of times they have work in addition to responding to all the levels. There's also the work in addition to all of the responding and managing and leading.
Oh, 100%. The number of times where I was like, oh, it's 7:00 and now I can actually get my work done. My story is not unique. There's so many of us out there who are actually starting their true workday around 7 p.m. after they've had dinner. They do it after their kids are being put to bed, and then they're doing the deep work. But at that point, you're mentally exhausted. And so your ability to give your full effort impacts your own ability for productivity and effectiveness, which then starts to create the spiral of, is the work I'm doing meaningful work? Is this actually having the impact that I want it to have? And then you start to question whether or not there's a values alignment, which is the first step to actually experiencing burnout.
How does your background in data-driven and digital marketing inform your approach to helping businesses grow through consultancy?
Yeah, my business, two core areas that we're talking about. So the first is around the data analytics side of it. And the second is around more of the qualitative pieces. So the quantitative pieces, as we think about organizations, it comes down to understanding how do we know who we're marketing to? What levers can you pull based on the data that you have? And so when we think about those areas, what we have to understand is you've got tons of data that's offline data, typically sitting in some sort of database somewhere, or maybe in some organizations, printed pieces. How do we turn that into digitized formats? You've got a ton of digital data, meaning you've got your GA4, your Google Analytics data, you've got your advertising data. How does that all come together to have you really understand who is your end consumer and how can you make sure that you're targeting them in the right way with messaging and content that is meaningful to them, that's actually going to convert?
You recently released a new book, Career Break Compass. Tell us about your strategy behind writing it.
Yeah, the Career Break Compass has been such a meaningful project because the strategy behind writing it was how can I help people through their own journey of burnout to also understanding if they wanted to take some sort of break, whether they wanted to take an extended amount of time away from work, how could they do that in a way that did not hurt their career and their career trajectory, but also allow them to still refuel themselves, be able to be passionate about their life and their work again, and really get aligned with what their core values are. So the whole plan around Career Break Compass was all about how do we create intentional plans for an intentional pause. And so many people I talked to, especially when I was planning my own break, didn't plan out how they were going to spend the time. And what I wanted to make sure that I did for my own personal break was maximize the impact I was having within the break, be able to get my mojo back and get clear in terms of what I want to do. And then also the next piece was get clarity on how do I want to re-enter work in a way that would be impactful and be able to deliver results, but also still make me feel good about being able to spend time with my family and enjoy doing the things that I love to do.
That's so smart. And I love that focus because mostly with people that have kids, we take a step back. I'm a twin mom. I had two at once. I thought I'm not probably going to have this opportunity again to be in the baby stage and be with them during these moments. But I remember sitting in the nursery thinking, if I don't have an intellectual conversation, I might lose my mind. I loved being with them, but they didn't talk back to me. And I had two at once. But you're right, because I was on a nonprofit board and I was lucky enough to listen to a lot of stories of women who either were regretting not taking the time to be at home with their kids or regretting, like you mentioned, not planning out that time so that they could then re-enter the workforce. So what you're focusing on is such a needed focus because you're right. We don't always plan that out in thinking of the next phase when we're done with the break.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's the key is I interviewed about 170 people as a part of this journey for the book specifically. And they are C-suite executives all the way down to managers. And you think about it even as gap years for college students, which I never took a gap year. I actually never took a gap anything up until this point. And I think the key learning that I had was in each of those interviews, the core areas that came up was being thoughtful about how to spend the time, but also being thoughtful about what they want to do after their break, to your point. And so for some people, they took a pivot, which means that they did something totally different than what their last years of experience had been. For others, it went back into a similar role and allowed them to be elevated in a different way. So I think the CEO of TaskRabbit talks specifically about her break, her year break that she took before she took her CEO role at TaskRabbit. And she talks about how they had planned out their ability to travel abroad, live abroad for a year, put their kids into school, have their kids learn a different language, and really be thoughtful about that time. It's really impactful for us, no matter where we are in a corporate ladder or in an entrepreneurship journey, of being thoughtful about how do we want to spend the time that we have in a way that makes us feel whole, not just from a work perspective, but from a holistic life perspective.
That's so interesting. And I love what they did too, because when we travel, we see that the world is bigger than ourselves.
Yes, I love that.
We can get so caught up in our day to day. And like you said, with the burnout, that we don't realize that the world is so much bigger than what we're experiencing.
Yes. One of the key things that we have to think through is the world is so much bigger and there's so much for us to experience. There's all this science around neuroplasticity, right? Of being able to make sure that we're continuing to learn as adults. There's adult development that is happening that sometimes we forget about. And a part of that is understanding how can you put yourself into new environments so that you're learning different things? How can you test and be curious, being able to make sure that you're taking action on them? And then also, how are you taking care of yourself? And so in the book, I talk about 4 Ps, which is play, pause, plan, and pursue. And the whole thought process around that is a science-backed approach to elevating our joy, making sure that we can be mindful and settling our nervous system, being thoughtful about how do we plan activities and plan setting goals for ourselves and our lives, which typically high achievers have no problem with. And then the pursuit piece is really key because now that you have all of these areas that you know you want to focus on, now you've got to go try it on. Now you've got to go test into it and see how does it feel? And is this exciting? Or is there an area that you need to pivot?
I love that you put play first.
100%. Yes. That was very intentional. So I don't know about you, but especially as a parent and especially as a woman in the corporate world for so long, play felt frivolous to me. That's something the kids do. When I would see people get engaged in different activities or go on vacations, there was almost a resentment in me, Melanie, like almost a piece of, wow, good for you that you got to do that. But what I learned about resentment is it's actually an internal desire of what we wish we could do if only we gave ourselves the permission to do it. And so play was really critical in being first for me because what I've recognized is that as adults, we put play on the back burner. But play is actually, if you think about the science of play, it actually helps us collaborate better. It helps us innovate better. It helps us be able to come up with new ideas. And ultimately, play allows us to be in flow, which we honestly think of as more pause, but play is what actually allows us to be in flow. It's the absence of time that we start to lose track of. And that's the beauty of play.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we're so busy with tech and it's so easy to be distracted. And it seems like when we play, we figure out and take the time to think about what we really want instead of just putting ourselves in front of whatever distractions in front of us, because it's easy to become distracted.
Yes. And that's with our devices. It's so easy for us just doom scroll. And play is thoughtful. It's intentional. It's about, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to dedicate time to do this thing that is going to elevate me. It's going to bring joy within me that I haven't felt. And when you have that moment, there's almost that dopamine that you get differently. It's like the real dopamine, not the technology dopamine. And you want that more. And some of that might just be doing a puzzle with your kids. It doesn't have to be super complicated. It doesn't have to require you to go travel the world. It can be small moments that you can find joy in.
What do you hope your readers will experience after reading your book?
My biggest hope is that it gives them permission to take care of themselves. And I think so often we talk about self-care as like these bubble baths or maybe massages that we take or whatever it might be. But I think self-care comes down to so much more than that. It's about giving yourself permission to be where you are, but enjoy where you are. And I think that's the difference.
And I have to ask this, did you enjoy the writing process? And do you have any advice for future authors out there?
Yes. So the writing process for me, they call the crappy first draft. I'll censor that. But that was actually the most cathartic experience. So the book actually came about because I had been journaling throughout my planning process and during my break. And as I was talking to more and more people, I thought to myself, maybe this framework could be helpful to other people. And so the first cut was very cathartic. Like it takes a long time and you do numerous cuts after that. And I think the key is allow yourself the space to continue to come up with different ideas to be able to make modifications where you need, but also be done. That was one thing that my editor was really great at. Amy was wonderful about that piece. She was like, Laura, we're going to be done and you're going to want to keep editing and that's okay. But you're going to have to move on and allow yourself the space to say, this is it for now. And there can be another version. So I come from the world of digital marketing where like I can go in and make a change on a website right now if I didn't like what it looked like. That's not the same as in print. And so once it's out, and for me, the learning curve has been being okay with what is there, that it serves the goal and the intention, and there's always something you can do better.
That's great advice, because perfect is the enemy of the good. Like if we keep trying to make it our own version of perfect, we'll never put it out there.
100%. Exactly.
Magic happens when we focus on the part of ourselves and our business that brings us joy. We've talked a lot about business and our work life today. What is one thing that you do to make sure that you find and live your joy?
Yeah. So I put play, pause, and plan into my week. So I'm always thoughtful about if I feel like my play tank, my joy tank is low, what am I going to do during the weekend to treat my weekend like a vacation? So that's really important for me. There's a researcher actually at UCLA, her name is Cassie Holmes, and she studies time poverty. And one of the things that she talks about specifically is discretionary time correlated with happiness. And what she found is that people who had excess amount of time and then also very little time had the lowest amount of happiness. And so the key is, how do you find that sweet spot of being able to use your discretionary time, which is around 2 to 5 hours a day. And so if you think about that, for me, I time block everything and make sure that I'm including play as a part of my day and a part of my week. And if for some reason I start to lose sight of that, I make sure that Saturday or Sunday are my weekend vacation days where I can treat the weekend like a vacation.
I love how intentional you are, and I'm a big fan of time blocking. As someone that is juggling a lot with technology and the speed of everything, we do have to plan in those moments. And if we do, we can be intentional about them. We don't have to be doing them, but have our mind somewhere else.
Yes. And I think that was the key. I had felt before that I had lost autonomy over my schedule. When I was getting double booked and just the anxiety would override me. When you're super busy and you have a lot to do, you have multiple teams that are reporting to you, you start to lose the autonomy that you have over your own life. And that's being reflected in your Outlook calendar. And so allowing yourself to time block gives you that autonomy back.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Please share with us how and where we can find you and your new book.
Thank you. Yes, you can find me at lauranguyen.co. I'm on LinkedIn and on Instagram, and you can buy Career Break Compass anywhere books are sold.
Thank you for joining us today. I'd love to hear from you. Reach out to me at hello@shebuiltit.com, on our She Built It website, or at She Built It on social. Thank you to my editor, Rich Streffolino, who always makes us sound good. Until next time, let nothing stop you from experiencing the life and business that you crave.